Driscoll warns Europe of Russia's missile threat while presenting Ukraine's peace plan. During his visit to Kyiv, the U.S. Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll outlined a 28-point peace framework to Western diplomats. He underscored that Russia's missile capabilities pose a threat far beyond Ukraine's borders, a wording he used to emphasize what he described as an urgency of a swift resolution to the war. That's according to the reporting by the New York Times. Anonymous Western officials say Dan Driscoll told them that Russia had been firing missiles at Ukraine almost as fast as it was producing them. Now, they say Moscow is making enough weapons to build a substantial stockpile of long-range missiles. These officials add that Driscoll's message was unmistakable. This threat could extend beyond Ukraine, and that's why, in his view, a rapid settlement of the war is essential. Officials who attended Friday's meeting with Driscoll and later spoke with the New York Times described Russia's military buildup as alarming, saying his warning clearly resonated. The paper notes that Washington would typically condemn Russia for amassing weapons, not use that fact to sell a peace plan that could leave Ukraine at a disadvantage while facing Russian aggression. The article also says that even though the original peace proposal has been adjusted, the Trump administration's core arguments remains. Russia holds the upper hand in the war, and Ukraine should move toward a settlement sooner rather than later. Media reports further say during his visit to Kyiv, Driscoll told Ukrainian officials about a looming risk of a defeat and weakening negotiation position if the fighting continues. The United States, officials say, wants to secure a peace agreement first before committing to any long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. That's according to the reporting by Politico, citing its own sources. According to the one EU diplomat and a second person familiar with the talks, the conditions became a key element in the US proposals put forward to Kyiv last week. On Tuesday, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told European officials during a call that President Donald Trump is ready to agree to a long-term security guarantees for Ukraine, but later, after a peace deal is reached. Another EU diplomat said Rubio also raised the topic of security guarantees during discussions in Geneva, but he did not provide details and did not repeat the offer in his subsequent calls with British and French officials. Rubio also outlined in broad terms several issues he believes should be addressed after a peace agreement. According to Politico, Europeans interpreted that as referring to territorial questions and Russia's frozen assets. The White House, for its part, insists that any peace plan will include security guarantees.
The Trump administration has repeatedly affirmed, publicly and privately, that any deal must provide full security guarantees and deterrence for Ukraine.
The report also notes that on Thursday, Rubio told his European colleagues that the United States is not seen as an impartial mediator in the talks. The reason, he explained, is that Washington is simultaneously providing military support to Ukraine while imposing sanctions on Russia. Speaking more broadly about the peace plan, some European countries fear that the Trump administration could tip the balance in favor of Moscow. In Moscow, officials say they support the Trump administration's plans, but they will not make any concessions in the Russian war against Ukraine. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that Moscow approves of the Trump administration's efforts to find sensible solution, but stressed that does not translate into a willingness to compromise on the conflict.
We welcome the efforts of the Trump administration to seek reasonable solutions and sensible resolutions. The various versions of this plan represent negotiation points. There can be no question of making any concessions or abandoning our approach to key issues and the tasks before us, including in the context of the ongoing military operation. I emphasize that the various elements of anchorage themselves represent compromise solutions. This was also mentioned by the President of the Russian Federation.
The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister said Moscow is primarily seeking to pursue its goals through diplomatic channels. However, in reality, that claim is disputed as Russia continues to carry out missile strikes in Ukraine. He stressed that the key factor is political will and the readiness to implement agreements previously reached by the leaders at the encouraged talks. He added that Russia is prepared to work with the existing materials while reviewing the US proposed plan aimed at settling the Russian-Ukrainian war. Ukraine and the United Kingdom have signed a license agreement to produce Octopus interceptor drones, the Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal said on social media. Plans call for mass production of these drones help counter aerial threats. According to him, delegations from the Ukrainian and UK Ministers of Defense have already signed the licensing agreement. He noted that the plan is to launch large-scale production of the interceptors up to several thousand units per month. All drones manufactured under this agreement will be delivered to Ukraine to strengthen the protection of its airspace.
Together with our allies, we are strengthening Ukraine's air defense capabilities. The delegations of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom have signed a licensing agreement for the Ukrainian interceptor drone Octopus. This is a historic precedent and an important next step that will enable the production in the United Kingdom of Ukrainian interceptor drones that have proven effective in countering Shahed drones. Mass production is planned and could reach several thousand interceptors per month. The produced systems will be transferred to Ukraine to reinforce the protection of our airspace. I thank our British partners for their cooperation, trust, and contribution to strengthening Ukraine's air defense.
Ukraine can halt the advance of Russian forces and stabilize the front line if it receives sufficient military support from Western partners, coupled with the economic sanctions, according to the Institute for the Study of War.
Ukrainian forces have proven effective at constraining Russian advances and conducting successful counteroffensives, particularly when well-staffed and well-equipped. Ukraine notably forced Russian forces to withdraw from Kyiv Oblast and elsewhere in northern Ukraine in April 2022, liberated much of Kharkiv Oblast in a surprise counteroffensive in September and October 2022, and forced Russian forces to withdraw from right bank Kherson Oblast in November 2022, following a successful summer-fall interdiction campaign. Ukrainian forces have liberated over 50% of the territory that Russian forces have seized since 2022 and forced Russia to expend manpower, equipment, time, and energy on attritional offensives that generate losses disproportionately high relative to the amount of gains.
Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War say Ukrainian forces have inflicted disproportionately high losses on Russia, forcing the enemy to spend time, personnel, and equipment on exhausting offensive operations. They also remind that Ukrainian units disrupt Russian attacks in the north of Kharkiv and Sumy regions in spring 2024 and January 2025, respectively. According to analysts, timely and sufficient Western military support, including weapons sales, combined with decisive economic measures by the US and other Western countries, could allow Ukraine to halt Russian advances on the battlefield, especially if Ukrainian forces leverage their well-developed fortifications in the Donetsk region. Meanwhile, experts warn that if Russian forces continue their current pace, a full capture of the Donetsk region is unlikely before August 2027.
Data on Russian forces' rate of advance indicates that a Russian military victory in Ukraine is not inevitable, and a rapid Russian seizure of the rest of Donetsk Oblast is not imminent. A senior US military official reportedly stated that the war will only worsen for Ukraine as Russia can fight indefinitely, and that it is better for Ukraine to negotiate a peace settlement now rather than negotiate from a weaker position later. The Kremlin has consistently pushed a narrative claiming that a Russian victory is inevitable, particularly since reports first emerged of the 28-point peace proposal, in order to push Ukraine and the West to acquiesce to Russia's demands. The reality on the battlefield indicates that a Russian victory in Ukraine is far from certain, however.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments below.